knowing that my dream was to retire early and get into ranching in Texas. So there we are.
I guess we'll go ahead and kick it off. So introduce yourself, how y'all met, and where y'all are from, and life before the goats.
We are David and Dianne Hefner, and we're from Robert Lee, Texas. We were both born and raised in southern Illinois. Lived within 15 miles of each other till wedding bells.
Okay.
Never met till we were sophomores in college.
Wow.
And one day, walking off campus, went by a restaurant on College Avenue, and there was in the restaurant was a large table with 7 or 8 girls. I was on the outside looking in. I recognized some of the females as co-ed, and but there was one standout.
Ta-da. I hope that was you.
And so a few minutes later, I nodded at one of the girls I recognized and indicated I'd like her to come to the door of the restaurant and let me ask who this was, which I did. And she said, "Well, David, don't get too excited. She's taken."
Uh-oh.
So I said, "Please tell me who it is, and I'm not gonna steal her. I'll just dream about her." So that's the way that got started. Well, she's rather steady with a boy and committed. And so, that being said, her name is Dianne Boker. Whether that's important, it's not now. Anyway, I was head over heels, first sighting. That's how we met, and I introduced myself one day at a class. She was coming out, and I was going to a next class in the same room, and I said, "Excuse me, I'm David Hefner. I saw you in the restaurant the other day, and I wanted to introduce myself."
And what year was that?
That was in
1959.
59.
Wow.
That was in 59.
Wow.
Because we graduated from high school in 59 and we started college that fall. Yeah. So, yeah. So anyway.
So it had to be 60.
Well, okay. But anyway, it was
60.
way back. It was in the olden days. So, yeah. I think we might have started going out more or less as a group, several of us together. David was in the, and we'd go to, back then you could drink when you were 18 years old, and we would go to some bars and have drinks and have beer and pizza. And so that's
and drive-in movies.
Yeah, and drive-in movies. Yeah.
No, we met in 60.
Okay,
60.
but we are now. He's 82, and I will be 82.
But you don't ask a woman.
Well, I will be 82 in May. But long story short, David went off to the Air Force. I went off to the airlines. I flew for TWA. I went to college for 2 years, and I joined the airlines. And I was based in Kansas City. He was based in a base in Kansas, not too far from Kansas City. And he could come on the weekends, and we could see each other that way. And that's how we continued on. And then I quit the airlines. We got married. And that's from there on.
So y'all have known each other for over 60 years and been together
all this time.
All this time.
Yeah.
Did you have an agriculture background, or did you just decide one day to raise livestock?
Took ag courses in high school.
Okay.
I enrolled at the University of Illinois my freshman year. Well, my dad used to take trips by train and by plane, and back in the 50s,
Early 60s.
that was a special thing to take a flight. I flew my first airline flight in '59, early senior in high school. I flew to Kansas to go to Kansas State University. I wanted to be a pilot at the time. Knowing downrange, I wanted to be in agriculture.
Wonderful.
But my mother was dead set against it. She thought I was going to be barnstorming. You know what barnstorming?
Crop dusting, things like that. Yeah.
Diane has always said, I
Scarf and goggles.
learned with scarf and goggles.
Like the Lindberghs.
Yeah.
And Orville and Wilbur Wright.
And my boss on a flight job, my first job flying with Purina, thought I looked just like
Lindbergh.
Charles Lindbergh.
Charles Lindbergh was about the age David was when it started. There's a lot of similarity in looks, but he did work when he was in high school. He worked for a vet, a large animal vet. He also had relatives that had farms, and he spent a lot of time around livestock.
Mother wanted me to be a veterinarian.
And that's
She didn't tell me she wanted me to be. She just said, you cannot fly. You'll kill yourself. She was dead set against it.
So your mom wanted you to be a veterinarian.
She said, you better pick another outlook. So I selected vet medicine because I enjoyed agriculture and animals. I quit college because a recruiter had told me in college that I could fly. Go to officers candidate school. They call them 90-day wonders. You go for 90 days as an officer training and come out as a second lieutenant, and you go to flight training. I said, that's for me. And he said, we'll pay your college.
Wow.
So I signed up. And come to find out, I was lied to.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Even back then.
I had a pin in a knee. One of my knees was fractured, and the semilunar cartilage was torn. And it happened ice skating, and so they said, you cannot do the flight, we're sorry. So I bailed out of the Air Force for that reason.
Wow.
But I went on to do training to commercial pilot and on up the ranks, and I got the doctorate degree in aviation. And that's how I earned my living, knowing that my dream was to retire early and get into ranching in Texas. So there we are.
How did you get into goats, and when did you start? So
I got into goats at age 5. So Granddad had Spanish goats. Boer goats were unheard of at the time. And I thought the goats were so interesting, so productive, and I enjoyed being around them.
You could have goats because they are self-sufficient. They graze, and as long as they had water and graze, You know, and we had a couple of young people, our neighbors or something, would come in and check and make sure the water was okay and that kind of, and
supplement.
Sometimes feed supplement if we thought they needed it.
Hay,
but
everything.
When did we?
We bought Texas in 1989.
That was the Wall Ranch, the Wall place.
Where was that at?
Wall,
Texas. Okay.
Which is 20 miles. The ranch was 20 miles east of San Angelo on Highway 87.
So 1989, east of San Angelo, Wall, Texas, was the first place y'all got started at in Texas.
And he started with some Spanish goats, and that's where he met
Kensings. So tell me a little bit about how y'all two met, the relationship and partnership that y'all held with Robert Kensing and his wife Doris Kensing.
I met Robert at American Meat Goat Association in Texas. Robert Kensing is the best known name in Spanish goats, and he was from Menard, Texas, which was an hour southeast of San Angelo. That was in 90, I met Robert. I had purchased 5 goats, nannies, in San Angelo from a ranch, and a rancher that I knew. One of the nannies I selected from his herd had given birth to 8 sets of twins, so I thought, that's good. Anyway, that's how that got started. I met Robert then in 90. There's an interesting thing coming here. I didn't buy a goat from Robert Kensing, and one day he put his arm around my shoulder and said, I want to tell you, you and I can go places. I said, I'm willing. Tell me what to do. Meeting him at a meeting in Junction, Texas, American Meat Goat Association, I said, Robert, when I realized that we were hitting it off, when you feel like I'm irritating you, feel like a puppy following you around, he says, fear not. I said, but if you do, let me know, please. I will let up. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. We hit it off. In 93, he says, I think you know I've got something going here. He was leasing goats to one rancher, 40 a year, Billy's. He leased them to him. And that man returned them as I returned Billy's. And I had done it I was on my 3rd year when he said this to me. He says, we could form a gene pool if you will do this. I said, Robert, I don't believe I can afford to buy your goats. He says, listen to me. I'm going to give you 2 nannies. And he says, you take those home and put them with this Billy that you got this time on lease. And we'll start a genetic pool, you and I. And he says, we'll try to get Tom Carter involved. Tom's the Concho Electric executive.
I know.
And president of the American Meat Goat Association.
That's how that all got started.
Back to Kensing, he gave me 2 nannies.
What year was that?
That was in 93.
So 30 years ago, just about 30 years ago.
I said, I don't feel right. What am I adding to this partnership? He says, this is a shake hands partnership no attorneys, no nothing. Just strictly you and I. And he says, you guard the genetics and the gene pool. And I said, I will. You can trust me, I will. He says, now there is one condition. You must get rid of those nannies that you have.
The original nannies.
So this was in '93 is when you started, you gave up everything you've worked on the past 4 or 5 years to restart with Robert Kensing.
Yeah. And then, from then on, all I had to do was lease
A Billy.
Billies. And when I got up to 35 goats at the Wall Ranch and had no other ranch to go to, and this was a small piece of ground.
It was 40 acres, just 40 acres.
40 acres.
Just a shack.
Just the bee barn.
Yeah, just full of that. Guess what that one was full of? The bees.
It was.
When we started looking elsewhere for property.
Yeah.
And that's when we found the place in Robert Lee.
So '93, y'all got started. Pure Kensing, Robert Kensing, genetics. But you've been raising Kensing genetics since '93. So 30 years. We're talking about 30 years. That's so. What's your most fond memory that you two have with Robert Kensing and Doris Kensing? What sticks out the most for both of you? So we'll go through you first.
Let me answer that first, because he had a wife. They had no children. His wife, Doris, was a total jewel. She was a retired teacher. She was funny. She was smart, and she didn't let Robert get by with anything. It's Tyler and Nick. It's a young, I said it's like Tyler and Nick. Perfect marriage. They had the most beautiful home, and that's the first thing I really remember was going to their home in Menard on Bowie Springs. And I say Bowie Springs because this was like Eden. It was... We
20 acres.
Turned off the highway and went on forever, and it was ugly and dry, and then all of a sudden, and we crossed I don't know how many cattle guards, but we get down, and I went, oh my gosh, this was heaven. Live oaks everywhere. Being on Bowie Springs, it was, and he had grass that was just, well, it was watered from Bowie Springs. He had enough water.
I'm thinking of the name of that.
I'm trying to the grass.
St. Augustine.
St. Augustine. Thank you.
Did you come up with it?
Yeah, she came up with it.
Did she?
But yes, she did. But anyway, it was lush, and it was beautiful, and they had this neat home that was just
an old farm.
But it was big, and it was just so pretty.
Down at Junction, Texas, where we had the annual meeting every year, in '94, he put his arm around me, my shoulder, and said, my friend, being Doris and he and Doris, we've enjoyed your friendship, and I trust you, and your interest tells me that this could blossom a little bit. He said, you have shown the interest and sincerity in the program, and he says, I want to make an offer to you because I trust you. And I said, well, I appreciate that very much. I don't know what I've done to deserve that. So I'm going to suggest that you take the Billy this year that you're going to lease for the 90 days. I always leased for 90 days and paid $100 for that. Because he was getting $6,000 for a Billy to sell. and I didn't have the wherewithal. I had kids in school, college, and so forth. So he said, you take this billy, and I'm going to give you, and this is just between you and I, he said, give you the 2 billies, or 2 nannies to take back, isolate them, and breed them only to that billy. Keep those dolings. And he says, when you bring the billy back, then I'll give you another billy the following year.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even share it with Diane. He said, this is between you and I. I didn't know if he meant period.
So don't tell your wife.
So anyway, that was my standout point.
That was his standout with Kensing, yeah.
Describe the environment that y'all raise y'all's goats in.
The environment is range in West Texas. It's drouthy. We do feed supplement form of 20% cube, ½ inch, and trace mineral, always available to them in the form of a block. I don't do the mineral like you do. We both make it available to them.
Mm-hmm.
And yours is granular, is it?
Mm-hmm. Loose.
Yes. And I use a block, and it's trace mineral, not the full mineral like you do.
Uh-huh.
I didn't think it was that necessary if I went with top end cube,
Mm-hmm.
which has quite a bit of mineral in it.
That's correct. You said ½ inch cube, 20%, what, anywhere between 2 times a week?
And I think some of the success that I have, I attribute to the fact that we use a 20% cube. I give a little bit of variety in the fact that when I feed a sweet feed, 10.5%.
Okay.
One feeding every 60 days around the calendar.
Okay.
And I think that breaks their diet a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And they do like it. I feed the hay in the form of hay grazer, square bale, once a week during the winter, starting in middle of December and going through till the last of February.
Do you vaccinate your goats? Why and why not? Why or why not, I should say.
I do not. I think the producer takes a beating the way it is because of the cost of feed. I'm tight in the pocket.
Yes, he is.
And I also think, why break the trend of a strong Spanish goat and let that immunity prosper?
Exactly.
And I'm big on that. The same goes for drenching. I don't do it. I'm not saying I'm right, but I've had
Success
for over
Yeah.
30 years doing
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah.
there's definitely success there.
Well,
and it's easier to do in West Texas
Than it
because
is.
of the drought.
yeah,
Yes.
because it's so dry. Yeah,
That is very true.
yeah.
Describe your breeding cycle. When do the billy goats go in, and how many herds do you run? So kind of briefly explain how you rotate your billies through, how many pastures you have, and then how you keep from what we talked about last night, where
Incest.
Incest, correct. How do you prevent that? Briefly.